Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled, Boyfriend's Secret Online Affairs Led to Our Breakup. Trust and open communication were always cornerstones of my relationships. But there I was, heart pounding, palm sweaty, unlocking Ethan's phone while he was in the shower. The guilt of invading his privacy warred with the desperate need to confirm or disprove my growing suspicion. Let me back up a bit. I'm India, 28 years old, and until recently, I thought I was in a happy, committed relationship with my boyfriend of 3 years, Ethan. We met through mutual friends at a housewarming party for our college buddy, Anthony. I remember that night vividly. The warm glow of string lights in Anthony's backyard, the buzz of conversation, and the moment Ethan walked in. He was tall, with tousled dark hair and warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We were introduced by Anthony's girlfriend, Karen, who'd become one of my closest friends since college. India, this is Ethan. He works with Anthony at the tech startup, Karen said, a knowing glint in her eye. Ethan, meet India. She's the talented graphic designer I've been telling you about. Ethan's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. Nice to meet you, India. Right, I've heard a lot about your work. That campaign you did for the local animal shelter was brilliant. I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. Oh, thanks. It was a labor of love. I'm a bit of a dog person. Me too, Ethan grinned. I volunteer at the shelter on weekends sometimes. Maybe we could swap dog stories over a drink? And just like that, we were off. The party faded into the background as Ethan and I talked for hours. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans to meet for coffee the following week. Our relationship progressed naturally from there. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates, which led to weekends spent exploring the city together. Ethan was attentive and kind, always surprising me with little gestures that showed he was listening, like bringing me my favorite pastry from the bakery across town, or remember to ask about a work project I'd mentioned weeks ago. Before I knew it, a year had passed and we were talking about moving in together. We found a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in a vibrant neighborhood, close enough to both our workplaces. I worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm while Ethan was a software engineer at the tech startup where he'd met Anthony. Moving in together was both exciting and challenging. We had to learn to navigate sharing space, dividing chores, and balancing our social lives with our new domestic routine. But overall, it felt right. I loved coming home to Ethan, cooking dinner together, and curling up on the couch to watch our favorite shows. We settled into a comfortable rhythm. Weekdays were busy with work, but we always made time for each other in the evenings. Weekends were for brunches with friends, trying new restaurants, or sometimes just lazy days at home. We even started a tradition of Adventure Sundays, where we'd take turns planning a surprise outing for the other. Everything seemed perfect. We both had good jobs that we enjoyed, a great group of friends, and a relationship that felt solid and loving. We even started having tentative conversations about our future. Marriage, kids, where we might want to settle down long term. I thought I had found my person, the one I'd built a life with. But about 6 months ago, things started to change. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I almost didn't notice. Ethan seemed distracted, always on his phone. He'd laugh at something on the screen, but when I asked what was funny, he'd just say, "Oh, nothing," and put the phone away. I try not to let it bother me after all. We all have private jokes with friends or family members, but it kept happening more and more frequently. Ethan started working late more often, claiming big projects at work. When he did come home, he'd be exhausted, barely engaging in conversation, before heading to bed. I told myself I was being paranoid, that relationships go through phases. Maybe this was just a rough patch, the kind all couples experience. But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One night, about 3 months ago, Ethan and I were having dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. It was meant to be a date night, a chance to reconnect amidst our busy schedules. But Ethan seemed distant, his eyes constantly flicking to his phone on the table. Is everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. You seem a little distracted. Ethan looked up, a flash of guilt crossing his face before he smiled. Yeah, sorry, just some work stuff. You know how it is with this big project. I nodded, but something felt off. I thought the project was wrapping up soon. Didn't you mention that last week? Yeah, Ethan stammered, but you know how it is in tech. Always another fire to put out, another bug to fix. I wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. As we finished our meal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan and I were cuddled up on the couch watching a movie we'd both been looking forward to. His phone, which was on the coffee table, kept lighting up with notifications. At first, he ignored them, but after the third or fourth buzz, he reached for it. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Yeah, just work stuff, he muttered, tapping away at his screen. I couldn't help but notice the way he angled the phone away from me. A flash of a profile picture, definitely not work-related, caught my eye before he locked the screen and put the phone face down on the table. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. The pit in my stomach grew and I couldn't focus on the movie anymore. Ethan seemed oblivious, laughing at the on-screen antics while I sat there, my mind racing. The next morning, Ethan left for work early, saying he had a big meeting. I called in sick to work, my mind still reeling from the night before. I paced our apartment, debating what to do. Part of me wanted to confront Ethan directly to demand answers. But another part, the part that was scared of what I might find, held me back. That's when I heard it, the ping of a notification from Ethan's iPad, which he'd left charging on the kitchen counter. Without thinking, I walked over and picked it up. The screen lit up, showing a message preview from someone named Amber. Miss you already. Can't wait for our next chat. My hand shook as I unlocked the iPad. Ethan and I knew each other's passcodes, another sign of the trust I thought we had. What I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of conversations with various women, spanning back months, flirty messages, explicit photos, planned to meet up for video chats. It was all there in black and white, undeniable proof of Ethan's infidelity. I sat at the kitchen table, iPad in hand, for what felt like hours. I read through message after message, each one feeling like a knife to my heart. Ethan had been living a double life, cultivating online relationships with multiple women while coming home to me every night. There was a 25-year-old yoga instructor from California. Their conversations were filled with flirtatious banter and thinly veiled sexual innuendos. They'd been talking for nearly 4 months. Then there was a 30-year-old marketing executive from New York. Their chats were more explicit, filled with suggestive photos and detailed fantasies. This one had been going on for almost 6 months. The list went on, each conversation a fresh betrayal, a new wound to my already battered heart. I felt sick, physically ill as I scrolled through message after message. One exchange with a girl named Sophia caught my eye. Don't you feel guilty talking to me like this when you have a girlfriend? What India doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, this is just online fun. It's not like I'm actually cheating. His casual dismissal of our relationship, of my feelings, hit me like a physical blow. How could he not see that this was cheating? That he was betraying my trust with every message, every photo, every secret video call? When I finally heard Ethan's key in the lock that evening, I was still sitting at the table, the iPad now dark in front of me. He walked in, a smile on his face that quickly faded when he saw my expression. Indy, what's wrong? He asked, concern in his voice. The concern felt like a mockery now. I pushed the iPad towards him, my voice surprisingly steady, and I said, Care to explain this, Ethan? His face went pale as he picked up the device, unlocking it to see what I discovered. For a moment, there was just silence, broken only by the sound of Ethan's ragged breathing. India, I can explain, he finally stammered. I let out a bitter laugh. Explain what exactly? How you've been cheating on me for months? How you've been lying to my face every single day? Ethan sank into the chair across from me, his head in his hands. It's not what you think. These women, they don't mean anything. It's just online. It's not real. Not real? I echo, my voice rising. How is it not real, Ethan? You've been sharing intimate details of your life with them, sending them pictures, making plans to video chat. How is that not real? He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I never meant for it to go this far. It started as just harmless flirting. But then, I know, it just spiraled. But I swear, India, I never met any of them in person. I love you. You're the one I want to be with. I shook my head, tears finally spilling over. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have betrayed my trust like this. Please, Indy, Ethan begged, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. We can work through this. I'll delete all the apps, block all the contacts. I'll do anything. Just please don't throw away what we have. Part of me wanted to believe him, the part that remembered all the good times, all the dreams we'd shared. But the larger part, the part that was screaming in pain and anger, knew that things could never be the same. I think you should leave, I said quietly, standing up. I need time to think. Ethan's face crumpled, but he nodded. Okay, I understand. I'll go stay with a friend for a few days. But India, please, promise me you'll think about giving us another chance. I didn't respond, just watched as he packed a bag and headed for the door. As it closed behind him, I sank to the floor, finally allowing myself to break down completely. The next few days were a blur. I called in sick to work again, unable to face the outside world. My phone was flooded with messages and missed calls from Ethan, which I ignored. I alternated between crying, sleeping, and staring blankly at the walls of my apartment. On the third day, I finally reached out to Karen. She came over immediately, armed with ice cream and a fierce protectiveness. She offered me a comfort I desperately needed, and I had never been more glad for my friend since then. Karen offered to take us out so I could get some fresh air, and I readily agreed. I needed to get away from the place. As we walked through the nearby park, the sun on my face and the gentle breeze helped clear my head a bit. Karen and I talked about mundane things, work gossip, the latest binge-worthy TV shows, and for brief moments, I almost felt normal again. When we returned to the apartment, I felt a little stronger. I think I need to talk to Ethan, I said slowly. I need closure. Karen nodded. If that's what you need, I support you. Do you want me to be here when you do it? I considered her offer, but shook my head. No, I think this is something I need to do on my own. But thank you for everything. After Karen left, I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. There were several more missed calls and messages from Ethan. I ignored them all and simply texted, "We need to talk. Come over tomorrow at 7. His reply was almost immediate. "I'll be there. Thank you, Indy." The next evening, I paced nervously around the apartment, waiting for Ethan to arrive. When the knock finally came, I steeled myself before opening the door. Ethan looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. He had done this to himself. "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let him enter. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Finally, Ethan spoke. He apologized thoroughly. I would almost say sincerely, but when I asked about why he'd done this to us, he had no answer, and that was an answer in itself. Ethan begged for a second chance, making wild claims of love and how he'd improve himself, but I knew that no amount of couples counseling or therapy could fix what had broken between us. I knew that I simply would never be able to look at him the same way again. So I broke up with him and told him to leave. "I'll start looking for a new place," he said quietly. Can I stay here until I find somewhere?" I nodded. "You can stay in the guest room, but Ethan, this is really over. I need you to understand that." He nodded, looking defeated. I understand. I'm so sorry, India. I hope someday you can forgive me. As he retreated to the guest room, I sat on the couch, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. It wasn't the ending I had imagined for us, but I knew it was the right decision. The next few weeks were challenging. Ethan and I lived like awkward roommates, barely speaking as he packed up his things and searched for a new apartment. Friends rallied around me, offering support and distractions. I threw myself into work, grateful for the focus it provided. One evening, about a month after the confrontation, I was sitting on the balcony of our apartment, soon to be just my apartment, watching the sunset. Ethan had found a new place and was moving out the next day. As I sipped a glass of wine, I reflected on the whirlwind of emotions I'd experienced over the past few weeks. It had been a mess. It was still a mess, really, but at least things were finally about to fully change now. The next morning, I woke up to an empty apartment. Ethan had left early, taking the last of his belongings with him. As I walked through the rooms, I was struck by how different everything looked. It wasn't just the missing furniture or the empty spaces on the shelves. The whole apartment felt different, as if it had shed a skin and was waiting to be redefined. I spent the day rearranging furniture, cleaning every surface, and sage smudging each room. Our ritual Karen had suggested to clear out the bad energy. As silly as it had sounded at first, there was something cathartic about the process. With each swipe of the cleaning cloth, each waft of sage smoke, I felt like I was reclaiming my space, my life. That evening, my friends came over for a New Beginnings dinner. Karen, Anthony, Emma, and a few others from our circle gathered in my newly arranged living room, filling the space with laughter and warmth. To India, Karen toasted, raising her glass. The strongest, most badass woman I know. Here's to new beginnings and better days ahead. As we clinked glasses, I felt a surge of gratitude for these people who had stood by me through one of the toughest periods of my life. They had been my rock, my support system, reminding me of my worth when I'd forgotten it myself. The weeks turned into months, and slowly I began to heal. I threw myself into work, taking on challenging new projects that pushed my creative boundaries. I reconnected with old hobbies, painting, yoga, biking, finding joy in activities I'd neglected during my relationship with Ethan. I also started therapy, working through the trust issues and self-doubt that Ethan's betrayal had left me with. It wasn't easy facing my fears and insecurities head-on, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted to move forward. A few weeks later, I was at a work event showcasing some of my recent designs. As I was explaining one of my pieces to a small group, a tall, blond man on the edge of the crowd caught my eye. He was listening intently, a look of genuine interest on his face. He, Oliver, as he introduced himself, struck up a conversation with me about some of the details of my designs. We ended up talking for over an hour, losing track of time as we discussed art, design, and our shared passion for creativity and education. As the event wound down, Oliver hesitated for a moment before asking, "I know this might be forward, but would you like to grab coffee sometime?" I'd love to continue our conversation. For a split second, I felt a surge of panic. The memory of Ethan's betrayal flashed through my mind, along with all the doubts and fears I've been grappling with. But then I remembered Karen's words and my promise to myself to not let the past dictate my future. Taking a deep breath, I smiled at Oliver. "You know what? I'd really like that." As we exchanged numbers, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to open my heart again. Walking home that night, I reflected on the journey I'd been on over the past months. The pain of Ethan's betrayal had been immense, but it hadn't broken me. Instead, it had forced me to confront my fears, to rediscover my strengths, and to learn to trust myself again. I couldn't know what the future held, whether things with Oliver would develop into something meaningful, or if he'd just be a stepping stone on my path to healing. But for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about the possibilities. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, my space, filled with my energy and my dreams, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had survived one of the toughest experiences of my life and had come out stronger on the other side. Ethan's betrayal had shaken me to my core, but it hadn't defined me. Instead, it had become a chapter in my story. A painful one, yes, but also one of growth, self-discovery, and ultimately resilience. I still had work to do, wounds that were still healing, but as I got ready for bed that night, I realized something important. I was no longer just surviving. I was beginning to thrive, and whatever came next, I knew I had the strength to face it. The journey hadn't been easy, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them, armed with the wisdom of my experiences and the strength I discovered within myself. My story wasn't over. In many ways, it felt like it was just beginning. Here are my thoughts about the story. Karen is honestly such a legend, though. Like, not just but the supportive friend for the win. She knew the girl code inside out and refused to break it. Unlike a certain Sophia in Ethan's messages who knew he was in a relationship, yet texted him anyway. Some people are just built a little strangely, I guess. What made all those girls, or at least the ones who knew he was in a relationship with India at the time, flock to a man like Ethan? We'll never know. Props to India for standing strong too. She stood firm, said her piece, broke up with the cheater, and was the one to keep the apartment. The housing is especially important. Why? Because in stories like this, I've read about way too many where the victim is the one to leave or get kicked out. That's wrong. That's so wrong. If you've been done wrong, do what India did and dig in those heels to refuse to leave. Their bad decisions don't constitute an emergency on your part. They should be begging for forgiveness, not giving you space by literally kicking you from the house. Or am I getting too heated about a tiny detail? But in any case, I'm glad that Ethan is out and that Oliver is in. India deserves good in her life, as pretty much every human being does, and Oliver seems to be the far better pick here. I mean, Ethan really shouldn't be considered at all, considering the betrayal he committed. I mean, the sheer magnitude of it was insane too. Just how many girls was this guy messaging? And to think that it wasn't really a violation of their relationship just because it was online. Ethan should perhaps stay in therapy for a while before considering another relationship. There's enough trauma in the world as it is. There's no need to add to it. So all in all, a huge amount of credits to India, Karen, and Oliver, and also a huge amount deducted from Ethan. He can earn those back if he ever properly redeems himself. Remember, guys, no matter how many apologies someone throws out, unless they show you with their actions that they have changed, it's not wrong to hold a good amount of skepticism in your heart. You aren't bound to forgive someone just because they apologize. No one is.
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
My husband's secret webcam business destroyed our trust. Tom and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. We met in college. He was the charming business major who always seemed to have new startup ideas, and I was the practical nursing student who kept him grounded. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. The first sign that something was wrong came when Tom started working late nights. At first, it wasn't a big deal. He said he was picking up extra projects to save up for our dream vacation to Greece. I was proud of his work ethic, even if I missed having dinner together every night. But then the late nights turned into all-nighters. He'd come to bed at 3 or 4 a.m., long after I'd fallen asleep. When I'd wake up for my early hospital shifts, he'd be dead to the world, impossible to rouse. Our conversations became shorter, more surfaced. The intimacy we once shared started to fade. "Tom," I said one morning over coffee, "I feel like we're drifting apart. Can we talk about what's going on with work?" He looked up from his phone, dark circles under his eyes. "It's just a busy time, Nadia. This project is really important. Once it's done, things will calm down." I wanted to believe him, but something in his tone felt off. "Okay," I said, trying to keep the doubt out of my voice. "Just don't forget about us, all right?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Never," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek before heading out the door. Weeks passed and nothing changed. If anything, Tom became more secretive. He started taking calls in another room, his voice low and muffled. When I'd walk in, he'd quickly end the conversation or switch to vague small talk. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to surprise Tom with a late-night snack. I made his favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and headed to his home office. As I approached the door, I heard his voice, animated in a way I hadn't heard in months. "Yeah, that's it. You're doing great. A little to the left. Perfect." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. "What's going on?" "Beautiful. The clients are going to love this." My heart raced. Clients? What clients? Tom worked in software development. What kind of client work involved instructions like that? I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The voice inside immediately hushed. "Just a sec," Tom called out, followed by the sound of furious typing and a drawer slamming shut. When he opened the door, his face was flushed and he looked flustered. "Nadia, what are you doing up?" I held up the plate and mug. "I thought you might be hungry. Who were you talking to?" Tom's eyes darted to the computer screen behind him, which was now showing a mundane spreadsheet. "Oh, just on a call with the team in India. Time difference, you know." I nodded slowly, not believing a word. "Right. Well, I'll let you get back to it." As I turned to leave, Tom called out, "Nadia? Thanks for the snack. I appreciate you." I managed a small smile, but inside my mind was reeling. What was my husband hiding? The next day, I couldn't focus at work. My thoughts keep drifting back to Tom's strange behavior and the conversation I'd overheard. As I mechanically went through my rounds, checking on patients and administering medications, a plan started to form in my mind. I hated the idea of invading Tom's privacy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. If I was going to get answers, I needed to do some digging. That evening, I told Tom I had a late-night shift at the hospital. Instead, I parked down the street from our house, watching and waiting. At around 9 p.m., I saw Tom leave his car. This was my chance. With shaking hands, I let myself into the house and made my way to Tom's office. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of his computer screen. I moved the mouse, and the screen came to life, asking for a password. I tried a few combinations. Our anniversary, his birthday, the name of his childhood dog. Nothing worked. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a Post-it note stuck to the bottom of the monitor. It had a string of random letters and numbers on it. "No way," I muttered, typing in the code. To my shock, the screen unlocked. What I saw next made my blood run cold. The desktop was filled with folders labeled with women's names. With a growing sense of dread, I clicked on one. Inside were hundreds of photos and videos. Young women in various states of undress, posing and performing for the camera. Some looked barely legal. "Oh God," I whispered, feeling nauseous. "What have you done, Tom?" I clicked through more folders, each one worse than the last. It wasn't just photos and videos. There were spreadsheets with names, dates, and dollar amounts, chat logs full of explicit requests and negotiations. My husband wasn't just viewing this content. He was creating and selling it. I don't know how long I sat there, scrolling through the evidence of Tom's secret life. It felt like hours, each new discovery another blow to my heart. How could the man I loved, the man I thought I knew, be involved in something like this? The sound of a car door slamming snapped me back to reality. Tom was home. In a panic, I quickly closed all the windows and shut down the computer. I had just made it to the living room, pretending to watch TV, when Tom walked in. "Hey," he said, sounding surprised. "I thought you had a late shift." I turned to look at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "It got canceled," I lied, my voice surprisingly steady. "How was work?" Tom shrugged, dropping his keys on the side table. Same old, same old. You okay?" "You look a bit pale." I forced a smile. "Just tired. I think I'm going to head to bed." As I lay in bed that night, my mind raced. What was I going to do with this information? How could I confront Tom? And more importantly, How had our marriage come to this? I barely slept, tossing and turning as I replayed everything I'd seen. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't live with this secret anymore. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I waited until the weekend, not wanting to risk Tom running off to work to avoid the conversation. Saturday morning, I made us both coffee and asked Tom to sit with me at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," I said, my hands wrapped tightly around my mug for support. Tom looked up from his phone, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "What's up?" I took a deep breath. "I know about the webcam business, Tom." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," I said, my voice cracking. "Please don't lie to me anymore. I saw everything on your computer. The photos, the videos, the spreadsheets. How could you do this?" For a moment, Tom just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, to my surprise, his shoulders slumped and he buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I'm so sorry." I waited, my heart pounding, as Tom collected himself. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. "It started as a joke," he began. "A friend of mine from college was doing it, making decent money. He dared me to try it just once, said I had the look that some women go for. I felt sick. So you, what, started performing on camera?" Tom shook his head. "No, not me. I became a manager of sorts. I find girls who wanted to make money, set them up with equipment, coach them on what to do, take a cut off the profits." "Those girls," I said, remembering the young faces I'd seen. "Some of them look so young, Tom." "They're all legal," he insisted. "I always check IDs. I wouldn't." "But you're exploiting them," I shot back. "And you've been lying to me for months, years. How long has this been going on?" Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. "About 2 years," he admitted quietly. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 2 years. Half of our marriage had been built on this lie. "Why?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Why did you keep doing it?" "The money," Tom said, a note of desperation in his voice. "It was so much more than I was making at my day job. I told myself it was just temporary, that I'd quit once we had saved enough, but then it just kept growing and I didn't know how to stop." I shook my head, disgusted. "And you didn't think about how this would affect me? About what would happen if I found out?" "I never thought you would," he admitted. "I was careful. I kept everything separate." "Not careful enough," I said bitterly. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of his confession hanging heavy between us. "What happens now?" Tom finally asked. I looked at him, this man I thought I knew so well. Now he was a stranger to me. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I do know I can't just forget about this. Our trust is broken, Tom." He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I'll do anything to fix this, Nadia. Anything. I'll shut down the business today. I'll go to therapy, whatever it takes." Part of me wanted to believe him, to think we could work through this and come out stronger on the other side. But a larger part knew that some betrayals cut too deep to heal from. "I need some time," I said, standing up. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while. I need to think about what I want, about whether this marriage is something I can salvage." Tom looked panicked. "Nadia, please don't go. We can work this out." I shook my head, already heading for the bedroom to pack. "I'm sorry, Tom, but I can't be here right now. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk." As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I could hear Tom in the other room, alternating between cursing himself and pleading for me to stay. I tuned it out, focusing on the task at hand. Leave now, fall apart later. An hour later, I was in my car driving to my sister Kate's house. As I watched our home disappear in the rearview mirror, I let the tears finally fall. How had we ended up here? And more importantly, where do we go from here? The subsequent weeks passed in a haze of conflicting emotions. I veered wildly between numbing emptiness and bursts of intense anger, my mind struggling to process the magnitude of Tom's betrayal. He made constant attempts to reach out, bombarding me with calls and messages, but I rebuffed them all. I needed space to navigate the ruins of our relationship and to begin the process of piercing myself back together. After a period of self-imposed isolation, I finally agreed to meet Tom at a neutral location. The man who greeted me was a shadow of his former self, visibly worn down by the consequences of his actions. He spoke of shutting down the business and seeking therapy, but his words rang hollow against the backdrop of his deception. I left our meeting more conflicted than ever, unsure if our marriage was salvageable or even worth saving. In a last-ditch effort to rescue our relationship, we embarked on couples therapy. These sessions were grueling, forcing us to confront the ugly truths that had lingered beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect marriage. We made some progress in understanding the causes of Tom's actions and the depth of my pain, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something fundamental had been irreparably broken between us. 3 months after the initial event, I experienced a moment of clarity. On a quiet night as I lay awake in Kate's spare room, I realized that while forgiveness might be achievable someday, I would never be able to fully trust Tom again. The next morning, with a heavy heart but unwavering resolve, I asked for a divorce. The divorce process was a painful and messy affair, forcing us to dismantle the life we had built together piece by piece. Friends and family reacted with varying states of shock and disbelief, and I found myself having to recount the details of our separation repeatedly, each retelling only hurting me over and over again. Yet, as difficult as this period was, I also experienced a growing sense of freedom. For the first time since discovering Tom's betrayal, I felt in control of my own destiny. I channeled my energy into my work at the hospital, finding a comfort and purpose in caring for others when my own life felt so directionless. The long shifts and demanding nature of my job provided a welcome distraction from my personal problems. Outside of work, I began the process of rebuilding my life from the ground up. I moved into a small apartment of my own, reclaiming the ability to create a space that was uniquely mine, untainted by the memories of my failed marriage. Each piece of furniture I chose, each color I painted on the walls, felt like a small act of reclaiming my identity. I reconnected with old friends who had fallen by the wayside during my years with Tom, rebuilding relationships that had once been central to my life. These reunions were sometimes awkward at first, but they quickly became a source of strength and support. I found myself opening up about my experiences, surprised by how cathartic it felt to share my story with those who truly cared about me. In an effort to push myself out of my comfort zone, I enrolled in a photography class I had always been interested in, but never pursued. The act of capturing moments through a lens helped me see the world in a new light, finding beauty in places I had overlooked before. As I honed my skills, I began to see photography as a form of self-expression, a way to process my emotions and experiences through a creative outlet. 6 months after initiating the divorce proceedings, it was finally official. Standing outside the courthouse, divorce papers in hand, I was overcome by a complicated mix of emotions. Grief for the future I had lost, relief that the process was over, and a tentative hope for what lay ahead. It felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another, one that I would write entirely on my own terms. The year that followed was one of growth and self-discovery. I threw myself into my career with renewed vigor, taking on additional responsibilities and mentoring new nurses. My dedication and hard work paid off when I was offered a promotion to head nurse in the pediatric ward. This new role challenged me in ways I hadn't anticipated, pushing me to develop my leadership skills and build strong relationships with both patients and staff. I also began volunteering at an animal shelter, finding joy and healing in the unconditional love of the animals under my care. The simple act of walking dogs, playing with cats, and helping these creatures find their forever homes brought a sense of purpose to my weekends. It was here that I met Pickle, an elderly Labrador with soulful eyes who had been overlooked by potential adopters due to his age. Something about his gentle demeanor resonated with me, and before I knew it, I had signed the adoption papers. Pickle became my constant companion, his presence a soothing balm on the lingering wounds of my past. Caring for him gave my day structure and purpose beyond my work at the hospital. Our evening walks became a cherished ritual, a time for reflection and quiet companionship. Gradually, I began to reconstruct my identity, no longer defining myself by my relationship status or the trauma of my past. I rediscovered old passions and cultivated new ones, slowly but surely building a life that felt truly mine. I started a small container garden on my apartment balcony, nurturing herbs and flowers with the same care I gave to my patients. I joined a book club, rediscovering my love for literature and engaging in discussions with like-minded people. As the months passed, I noticed subtle changes in myself. I stood taller, spoke with more confidence, and found myself smiling more easily. The pain of Tom's betrayal was still there, a dull ache that flared up occasionally, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. Instead, it had become a part of my story, a chapter that had shaped me but didn't define me. 2 years after my divorce, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd reach. I was thriving in my career, surrounded by a network of supportive friends and deeply involved in my community. My apartment had become a true home, filled with mementos of my new life. Photos from hiking trips, artwork from local craftsmen, and Pickle's bed in the corner of the living room. The journey hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I thought I wouldn't make it through. Tom's secret had indeed destroyed our marriage, but it hadn't destroyed me. Instead, it had set me on a challenging but ultimately rewarding path of self-discovery and personal growth, leading me to a life more real and fulfilling than I could ever have imagined. Here are my thoughts about the story. What do you mean Tom was running a secret, explicit webcam business? Hello, this is the exact type of thing Hollywood movies and random foreign dramas try to plot twist with. Absolutely horrifying stuff. Women being exploited in intimate fields like this is way too common, and I won't sit here and lie to you and tell you that I wasn't feeling that fear, especially at the tiny bit where Nadia thinks some of the girls were barely legal. I mean, having a business contract with experienced women in the field is one thing, right? Because as weird as this entire scenario is, there's still an industry for this kind of stuff, and as a businessman, I'm sure that Tom understood that. The big glaring neon red flags are due to the fact that it isn't just business, but exploitation, and also the fact that he was literally lying to his wife the entire time. I'm glad Nadia was able to figure him out, because things could have ended very badly. Someone needs to give her a medal, because she didn't just save herself from this toxic marriage, but she saved so many potential girls from being mercilessly exploited. But here's the thing, though. Tom may have been a horrible person to do that, yes, but in a way, I'm still glad that they tried to go to counseling and tried to mend their relationship. Nadia gave him a full chance of healing, and this at least lets them grow as people. Now, hopefully, it was enough to kickstart Tom's redemption and ultimately end with having one less psychopath walking around society. Enough about the crazy one, though. Let's focus on Nadia, trading off a toxic marriage to a lying husband for an infinitely better life and a dog named Pickles? Glorious. Golden. Honestly, though, Pickles is such a cute name. I am 100% on board with the demand that everyone's dog should at least be considered for a food name. Good on her for taking these improvement steps. It's often way too easy to fall back into old patterns or fall forward flat onto your face when you try to take an unfamiliar step. But ultimately, Nadia came out all the better for it. The breach of trust that occurred was horrifying, and I'm so glad that she acknowledged that fact. packed up her bags, and moved on, as she should.
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.